Welcome, everyone, and thanks for tuning in. I'm Dave Liu, co-founder of Reel8. We share the stories of struggle and success behind iconic creators responsible for entertainment we love and focus on people who are underrepresented in the traditional entertainment system. By sharing their journey, our hope is to inspire you to support them as well as encourage you to create. Today, we welcome Bao Tran, an amazing filmmaker who is mentored by master action director Yuen. He has worked on films such as Cho Lon, one of Southeast Asia's highest budgeted action blockbusters, and Jackpot, Vietnam's official entry to the 2016 Oscars for Best Foreign Film. His first directorial debut was The Paper Tigers, which was praised by Variety and the New York Times. Welcome, Bao. Thanks for joining us today.
Thank you, Dave. Glad to be here. Thanks for having me.
Fantastic. So, like every great franchise film, let's start with your origin story. You said publicly that your family originally came from Vietnam with the fall of Saigon and immigrated here to the US. Tell me a little bit more about your family journey and how your heritage influenced who you became.
Well, as you mentioned, my family came post-Vietnam War, I guess, after the fall of Saigon in the late 70s. We came to the States, and I was I guess you would say, the first of my generation to be born here in America. So depending on scholars, no one has been able to really pin down definition for me, whether this first generation 1.5 or 2, but I don't know what it all means. But the point is, I was the first of my family to be born here in the States. And so that was kind of an interesting upbringing, because you had older siblings that, were born in Vietnam, but also are, starting to acclimatize themselves to here in the States and able to speak English fluently. And then you also have parents that are, working class, but also, trying to learn English essentially as a second language. The courses were called ESL at that time. And so that's, it's an interesting, bicultural household, because you're speaking Vietnamese at home, but, also speaking English, helping your parents translate, helping, all those things along and trying to make friends and fit in at the same time. So that's kind of I don't think it's very exceptional, but I think it's maybe a story that not most America is quite aware of, but it's a very common experience for any children of immigrants.
And what did your parents do in Vietnam and then here in the US?
My father was like a professor. He was a teacher of English and linguistics in school. I think it was like secondary school, what you would call high school. But yeah, he basically was able to kind of have an English foundation when he came to the States, and then help get the family its footing, at least with an English background. That helped a lot. And so, but he ended up working as a janitor when he was in the States. He already started working on very blue collar jobs to kind of support his family. So that's something that very much kind of seared in your head if you're a child of this type of immigrant experience of basically having your hopes and dreams, dashed by national politics and world events. And is that anything new, now in this day and age? But it's a very common thing. But you think about, he was probably I want to say 38, 37, late 30s when he eventually moved his family here. So you think about those chapters in your life. How much have you developed and established yourself and built a career and built your family at that age, and suddenly to have it all pick up and start all over again is very, very dramatic and traumatic, I'm sure. So those are kind of like an interesting questions that we always kind of grow up with, and kind of have that weight, a burden of responsibility, if we will, for better or worse, to kind of make those sacrifices worthwhile and live up to the things that your family had given out for you to be able to achieve.
So when you were growing up, kind of in your middle school, high school period, I understand you grew up in Washington. Were you one of the only Asian kids, or was there a lot of diversity in your class?
Depends. I think there were a lot of Vietnamese. There are two chapters. I grew up in Olympia, Washington, which is kind of like capital city of Washington State, but also because we had our family, my uncle is their sponsor family. So, all those communities kind of brought the immigrants closer together, because, you had the sponsor. So that there's kind of that chain migration where all the families were able to kind of build community through that. So we weren't dropped in as strangers. We knew each other. We knew this person or that person So there was definitely that. And then, oh, this person goes to that school, and oh, they're in that school district. But so we always have like Vietnamese events. For example, like weekend Vietnamese language schools was a big thing for the community to be able to support and have their kids like be tutored and start learning, you know, the rudimentaries of Vietnamese language, reading, writing, and spelling, and all that stuff. And so we did kind of like have that experience, but also we saw each other at school.
You'd been working on a film. You effectively had it in the can. And that was when you revealed to your parents, hey, I think I want to give this a go. And by the way, here's a finished film that I made.
Yeah. So, I mean, it was, I think it was VC. It's Visual Communications at LA, Los Angeles Asian Pacific Film Festival. They had my short film. They, you know, I basically got a letter of acceptance or something. You know, basically I had a screening. I was programmed for the festival. So I definitely had this bird in hand, and, you know, be able to kind of tell your family that I make movies, but also people like it and people want to show it. And so you kind of have that, you know, in your back pocket. So yeah, that was kind of the whole process. I wanted to wait till graduation because there wasn't to be said to me until then, to be honest, because I knew I had to get a degree, and that was just kind of family understanding to have a degree and have even as a fallback career, and then have something that you can have that's stable. If I were to be dropped out of college or, you know, didn't even start college, then I think that would have been a huge issue. So to me, I kind of played the long game and said, I'll do this 4 years, hunker down for 4 years and try to get this computer science degree, no less, and graduate in that, but also try to make some inroads into filmmaking.
Did your parents or your family watch the film?
Yeah, they liked it. Yeah, I mean, it all worked out, but there's all the questions like, yeah, it's cool, but, you know, can you make a career of it? You know, and those are all the gnawing questions. So, you know, that to me is what I started to really kind of start to understand. It wasn't necessarily, you know, against the arts or anything like that. It was just kind of like, well, what can you make of it?
Maybe you can just give us a little more color on how you transitioned from being a fan of film to really a student of film, because there's a lot of us who watch a lot of film. I certainly watch a lot of film, but I don't know 2 cents about like how to make a film. So maybe you can just give us a sense of how you made that transition as you were becoming a filmmaker.
Yeah, I would say, again, just to kind of set the scene, to have a video camera is really groundbreaking. And by that I mean a video camcorder, not necessarily a Super 8 camera or anything, which is all great. But, you know, for some cosmic circumstance, you know, I was born in this time where this thing was just starting to come into technology. And so I think that technology was a huge way for me to kind of like jump into that. And maybe we take it all for granted now with cell phones that take videos, and, you know, you can edit and stitch and do everything on your cell phone. But imagine a time where there was a barrier of entry to even make films, because you had to get the stock and you had to go film. And so it's very expensive. And the whole prospect of going to film school is, you know, very daunting. So I'm just saying that just to set the scene. And so for me to be able to even have an inkling or a spark of an idea that I could even make it started essentially with videotapes, essentially with TV and watching, you know, going to Chinatown and Asian mom and pop shops and getting these videotapes, or sharing videotapes with family members and swapping. You know, we'd have all these movies and TV shows that were from Asia. And that was kind of our lifeline to Asian culture, and be able to watch this together as a family and see movies and the latest, you know, entertainment that was going on, you know, across the ocean. And so I was watching all that stuff growing up, Bruce Lee especially, you know, huge Bruce Lee fan, and very much like you, like watching it as a fan and just being enamored. And so for me, Bruce Lee was definitely as an image of a movie star, but it wasn't anything that was like, I could do it, or that I could try to, like, you know, figure out what he was doing. He was just so much of a comet, you know what I mean? You can't catch that comet. Actually, it wasn't until I started seeing Jackie Chan, for some reason, just some light bulb turned on for me, because he has a certain type of filmmaking style, or it's very tangible. The way the rhythm he uses, the choreography, it's just a very musical, accessible thing. And I just really was fascinated by that, because I just wanted to start to tinker, you know, underneath the hood. How does it all work? How does the cut work? How does the framing work? Because he just had the perfect, like, concept of filmmaking. Not just martial arts ability, which is fantastic, but the filmmaking and shooting and editing of that was so fascinating to me. So I don't know what it was. It was just musical to me. It was like music to my ears, literally. If you close your eyes and watch his movies, you can hear the sound effects, and there's a certain tempo and a rhythm to all that. So yeah, that's when I started to kind of like really want to understand what that means. And because of that, you know, you had a VHS deck. You could pause it, you could record it and dub it and watch it again. Just go slow-mo, frame by frame. You could do all these things now, just in sitting at home if you just know how to use your VCR. And so that's how I started to learn how to make films, is actually, you know, filming on my camcorder and then editing between two VHS decks. And you start to kind of like figure out how the wires, all those, you know, whatever all that white, yellow and red cables, all that means in the back. And you start to figure all those things. It was very much self-taught. You know, mind you, this was before Google or any like tutorials that you could do. You start to figure out what all that means.
So you've also mentioned publicly that you had Corey Yuen as your mentor, and he had an influence on your early career and also your art. Maybe for the audience, you can tell us a little bit about who he is and how he influenced you.
Yes, Corey's a legend. He is one of the, I guess, pioneers or legends of Hong Kong cinema, especially if you're aware that history of the Hong Kong cinema kind of has this great trademark of action films. And that's where Jackie Chan and Bruce Lee came from. So he's also one of the great directors in that period to come out of that. And so he actually grew up with Jackie Chan. So Jackie Chan and Corey had grew up in what's called Peking Opera School, which is almost like a circus, a martial arts circus, performing circus. And they learned from an early age how to flip, how to tumble, do martial arts, sing, dance. That's very much like all the nines on that one. So they learned how to do all these things from a very early age and converted that into filmmaking. So now this generation of Jackie Chan and Corey and also Sammo Hung and like just a legendary group of filmmakers who, you know, were able to, you know, basically make something out of that. And so Corey was a huge influence. He's actually, you know, a family friend from high school. So that's how I got to know him. Just the fact that he was able to, incredibly busy, incredibly prolific filmmaker, to be able to sit down and watch my stupid videos and give me tips and actually tell me, you know, what to fix and what to do and all those things. So just the fact of that example, that he made the time and space for me, you know, I can't thank him enough. I mean, that's an incredible experience to have as a young person, or any person, you know, to have. So that's the first and foremost. And particularly specifically filmmaking, yes, the stuff that you said, kind of breaking down fight sequences, understanding what an action scene is. An action scene is really a storytelling scene. It's really a drama scene. You know, it's not about the moves, it's about what's going on with the characters. And that started kind of like opening my eyes in terms of what filmmaking was and what's engaging with an audience is. And yeah, and really evaluating the importance of story first and foremost, because if you can't have good action if you don't have a good story. That's something that you would always say. And so you always want to look for the story first and then build the action around that.
Let's talk a little bit about your claim to fame, the film that has really put you on the map, The Paper Tigers.
I swear to be loyal to my brothers, to the very day I die.
So I really love the film. I think it's a must watch for anyone, particularly Asian American families. Can you talk a little bit about what was the inspiration for the film?
So I already had this idea that I was about these guys that were just trying to discover their mojo and get their groove back in a martial arts setting, just as an idea. And I just started really polishing that idea and started figuring out, you know, what that meant thematically to me. Because like, if you ask inspiration, it was just the feeling of like being burnt out, not quite being in love with the things that you were passionate about once before. And what is that feeling? And I started to just kind of like use that as fodder to kind of come up with the idea for The Paper Tigers, which is about these three martial artists who kind of like, you know, go their separate ways, but they discover, you know, the roots and the relationships with each other. So this is really just a story of rediscovery. And so that's kind of like what set it on its way for that.
So let me just understand what was going on over this 10-year period. You, unless you were born wealthy or hit the lottery, which I'm pretty sure it didn't happen, you were still trying to make a living. And then you also were trying to raise money and you were also trying to make the film. So you were essentially triple processing during this 10-year period. Is that correct?
Triple or quadruple or quintuple, whatever processing, it was a lot. I think, yeah, I mean, it was a lot of multitasking and also kind of planning. I think maybe that's kind of where the savviness of being a freelance filmmaker kind of came in. Is basically feast or famine. And so you have to like learn how to kind of earn and save and keep your money and make sure it's all kind of like there for you. But not knowing when the movie was going to get made, because anytime you got the green light, you know, you better scramble and run and make it happen. So that's kind of it's almost like a 10-year holding pattern, but you know, your engines are revving so hard and you're just like redlining and you're going out still hustling and trying to get the money. It's not, but instead, if this is a holding pattern, you know, like, you know, I can't wait for the race, because it was like that type of pace. So we had to kind of like figure out how to get creative and figure out how to do this in a way that kind of made sense to the money folks that we were talking to, but also really move the ball forward for us. So I'll give a little bit of spoiler on the movie, but the first 10 minutes or the beginning portions of the film, you have the younger version of our heroes. It's set in the 80s and 90s, and you have that period piece essentially of this what they were like back in the golden years, if you will. And so for filmmaking, that was kind of our way in, because that meant we could shoot that portion of the film with the money that we had. We didn't have all the money, but we had some of the money in the bank, for example. Let's use some of that money to shoot parts of that film, and we could have it in the can, and so to speak, right? And then so when we can use that to find the rest of the money, we can shoot the adult versions or the older versions and have them come back. And so that was our way in. Like, it was just looking at the script and what options was presented to us. You can't do this to any movie, you know, and not all movies will be able to let you do that. But we just found a way to be able to say, what can we do now with the things that we can? So we were able to do that. We made a trailer out of it, exactly like you say. We turned it, that's what we actually pitched as a kind of our main asset in Kickstarter, to show this younger version and how like kick-ass these guys are, and let's finish out the rest of the movie. And then we went to pitch at Cannes. We were part of all these film incubators and labs, and we were able to pitch at the Cannes Film Festival, for example. And so it just opened all these doors just by allowing ourselves to shoot, you know, the first 10 pages and be able to like have something tangible, at least to show people. It wasn't vaporware. It wasn't just a script or an idea in my head. We actually had something, and we need you to help us finish. So that kind of changed our pitch. In a lot of ways, that was kind of like something that really was able to pour oil for us to kind of change that paradigm. Because again, we were just hitting walls and getting nowhere fast for the longest. And it was just like figure out how to do this. Now, the flip side was the risk. Like if we shot this film with some of the money we had and it didn't come to anything, then, you know, we just had a really expensive short film, or we would have been out of cash, or if we didn't have our Kickstarter. The thing about Kickstarter is it's a public crowdfunding campaign, and if you don't hit your goal, you don't get any of it. And so it could have been a very spectacular public crash and burn if we didn't hit our goal. And so it was all very much an all or nothing proposition by the time we got to that point, because it was like, you know, there's no way going back, because you can't ask for more money after if everyone can Google you and see a Kickstarter failed. Like that's as DOA as any, right? And so, you know, there's a lot of risks all involved, but again, you know, we just had to figure out a way to make it happen. So the entrepreneurship was like, you know, it's just that hustle, I guess, you know, now you call it hustle and grind, or grind. And so that was just like something that was just, we had to figure out and find a way to make it happen.
Well, it's amazing determination, because I'm not sure a lot of people would have just stuck with it for 10 years. I think others might have thrown in the towel and said, okay, I got this great 10-minute short story, short film about these kids training, or, you know, worse off, just, hey, look, you know, the film never got made. Sorry.
Exactly. Yeah, it's a weird thing. I mean, like, it's like, you see there's a boneyard, there's a whole like boneyard of films that never got made or got development hell, as they say. So stuff that gets stuck, you know, that's something we never want to do. We didn't want to get stuck. So we didn't want to let the perfect be the enemy of the good and all those things, and just make it happen, get out there and do it. And so that whole self-starting was like, again, I'll trace it back to my immigrant family background. Like that's what I saw. Like they were willing to give up everything and sacrifice and do everything. So why am I holding back? You know, why suddenly hold back now? We made it this far. And so to me, I look at the big tapestry of the family tree and the family history. Like, you know, there's no stopping now. We're not giving up, and that's not an option.
Well, we're obviously the beneficiaries of your stubbornness or your resilience, whatever you want to call it.
Yeah, I'm sure. Yeah, at least someone's benefiting from it.
Exactly. What are you most proud of from that film? I've actually seen some blogs about some of the philosophical lessons from the film.
Yeah.
And I don't know if that was part of your intent or not, but
It's all
this is
intended.
why
That's
I
what a
say
genius
it's great.
does.
Yeah, exactly. Just take the credit.
Yeah, exactly.
But there's a lot of great stuff in there for families. So that's why I think that I highly recommend it to Asian American families or all families to watch. But how do you think about the key lessons or takeaways from the film?
Yeah, I'll just, kind of do a summary of all the feelings, because we went through all the emotions, in terms of releasing the film. So I'll start with a high. I think it was really great to be able to release a film and have a distribution deal and have like a theatrical release in the midst of COVID with, 50% theater capacity or 25% if even. And so for our distributor to kind of like believe in our film and want to put it out there in this landscape, was very, very moving, because it's like they believe in the film, and then they're hustling in the same way that we had been hustling all the way up to now. So to have other supporters and your team be on the same page, that was great. The lows is kind of get that converse. I would say the lows is just the fact that we just haven't really had the opportunity to be able to really sit a proper crowd and watch this movie with a good audience. And because that at the end of the day is what we wanted to make the movie for an audience, to have a great Friday night, great Saturday night, and to laugh and cry with strangers in the dark. I mean, that to me is what movies are.
So you're clearly an example of the power of just hard work and sticking with it, particularly against all the odds. Are there things that you think would make the system a little easier for the other Bao Trans out there?
That's an interesting question. I think on the micro, for me, I do what I can to be able to pay it forward. So if anyone, I get a lot of introductions, or people come up to me at the screenings and they ask me how, advice about filmmaking or anything like that. Any opportunity I have to be able to, keep the trauma or save other people from going through grief, I'm all for. So on the micro and the personal level, those are the things that I can do, and those are within my reach. On the bigger level, cultural sea changes and all those things, those are going to be, on all hands on deck type of effort. I think it's going to take, our whole community as Asian Americans, or as film lovers, or just as a community as a whole, really need to kind of like understand the economics of filmmaking. Is, like I said, it's a very expensive hobby, but the numbers don't often quite kind of return in the same way, or at least let's say the cut of the share doesn't always return in the same way. And so, for example, there's that kind of well-known story out there about Squid Game, the creator of Squid Game, who created this incredible, phenomenal success for Netflix. But according to the details of the original deal, it's like the creator was not that financially remunerated. It wasn't as lucrative as you would think for the creator of Squid Game, but it was very lucrative for Netflix. Let's put it that way. And so there's a lot of inequities around the movie business and kind of the studio and the creators and all those things. So I think those are kind of bigger questions, but that we all need to start asking and challenging ourselves to be able to do, and and getting more savvy audience, right? It's not just say, oh, your movie's on Netflix, you're a big hit, you must be a success now. It's like that doesn't always pan out, because the numbers come down to the brass tacks with the numbers. Those aren't the deals that are being made right now. So I think that's something that we just need to all kind of start to understand, what the economics and the power of buying a movie ticket, but also the power of supporting creatives are also important as well.
What's next for you? What are you working on, and what do you want people to know you're working on?
Well, I mean, the best way you can do is follow me on the socials, or you can go to my website, bao.direct, and then you can find me on all the social handles. So that I'll put up like all the newest and latest news up there. For me this year, I'll be part of the CBS, or now called the Paramount Directors Initiative, which is a directing lab for directors to be able to transition or move into TV episodic directing. So I'm on the feature side. So this is kind of an exciting new thing to be able to direct for TV. And so this is an opportunity with Paramount to be work with them to be able to direct an episode later this year, hopefully. And hopefully that'll air probably late, a little bit after that.
That sounds great. I'm really looking forward to see what you're going to create. So my last question is actually two questions. As a filmmaker, what is your favorite film? And then what's your favorite film as a fan?
Oh, interesting. I almost feel like it's always the same. Like and then again, this answer kind of changes from day to day. It's almost like your mood. It's almost like what do you want to have for dinner? This is all just on your taste right now. For me, I think about Aliens a lot. I think about James Cameron's Aliens.
Talk to me, Hudson!
I got signals, I got readings in front and behind.
There's nothing back here.
Look, I'm telling you, there's something moving and it ain't us.
Get them out of there!
Both as a filmmaker and as a fan, because it's just a really fun, rip-roaring action movie. But it's also very thoughtful, and it's also thoughtful in terms of like how we treat our prejudice, how we treat our military, and just how we are like, you know, war crazed or war hungry, and just as relevant in this time as any. It's a very interesting kind of like way into these headier topics, but in a really fun action movie, if that makes sense. And that's kind of the balance that I was kind of look for. You know, I want to be able to say something and tell something about the world, but, you know, make it really fun and make it entertaining as well.
Yeah, and I love the Aliens. I probably prefer the very first one more than all the others.
Yep.
Well, great. Well, thanks again, Bao, for taking the time to chat with us today and share your story of struggle and success. It's an amazing one. And I encourage everybody to watch your film, The Paper Tigers, available right now on Netflix, as well as follow you on your social media. So thanks again, Bao, for taking the time to chat with us today.
Thank you, Dave. It was great chatting.